All right, everything's good, and you got your camera situated.
Yes, Steve. I do have my
Okay,
camera.
I'm making.
It took a little
I'm,
while,
I'm
man, but
I'm waiting for it to switch from this view to the one where your head's just barely in the shot.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like that one right there. Like, did Ronald get real small, or did his room get huge? You look like
yeah,
you're like
man.
so far away.
I'm so sorry about that.
All
All
right,
right, cool.
all right. What's up? Welcome to a new. Hold on. Okay, stop. Okay. Shh. What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 352. Stop, dude. You holding your breath is like not gonna help me get through this.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Take 3. And what's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 352. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron.
There he is.
And John.
And there you are.
Yes.
We made it. We got through that opening.
Yeah.
Third time's a charm.
The Giggle
how you guys
boys.
doing? Yeah, how you guys doing?
Feeling
Great.
pretty good. For whatever reason, I feel like we've got a good bubbly energy coming into this episode.
Good. Let's see if we can keep it up and
Yeah.
keep Ronald awake, and we'll be golden.
I apologize about this blaring background. I had to call an audible.
It's okay. It selectively blurs out the brand of your water, so we don't have to worry about any kind of like copyright things or whatever on the video. Good to see you guys. Yeah, sorry we missed a week last week. Life comes up as it does sometimes, but it's good to see you guys, and we got a fun episode ahead of us. We're going to talk about this week's required viewing, which the last episode I picked, Neverending Story. So we'll get into that in a moment, and I think we're all pretty excited to talk about the new Marvel special presentation of Werewolf by Night, which is now playing on Disney Plus. If you haven't watched it, it's available there for streaming right now. It came out last week. And then we'll kind of get into some other also brands and some things we've seen, some shows, some movies. I know John's really excited to talk about a sequel he watched at the end of the show. So wait for that with bated breath. But quickly, though, we wanted to talk about a news item that we planned to talk about last week. And it was an article that I came across. I sent around to everyone, and we started talking about it on our Facebook thread. Basically, and I don't know if you have it pulled up, John, but I don't have it pulled up. But like in essence, it's the idea of Bruce Willis has, or his estate, his character, whatever's happening there, have agreed to sell his likeness to a technology firm that is involved in like the deep faking of, the CG deep fakes of people, and whether it's in a commercial, a movie, a television, whatever it ends up becoming. It's kind of like this official thing. It's kind of the first time, and we can talk about the James Earl Jones announcement too, where there's been something official out there saying, he's not going to be making movies anymore. He's retired because of his health condition, but, somebody's making money, his family, him, whoever it is, by signing this agreement to say this company can basically take his likeness and make digital characters out of them, deep fake characters, whatever it ends up being called. And I don't know, it seemed really interesting, like an interesting situation, since it felt like kind of like the first official time like that's been more of a proactive thing, as opposed to where we've seen some of these CGI recreations of actors and characters who have since passed away, in movies and shows, with differing levels of success. But, their families are always involved in that stuff. But that's kind of always because of the property that's taking place, or this movie that's being filmed or in production, where this felt more like, or reads more like, hey, we want to, make this something that you can keep making stuff with his likeness, even if he's not able to make movies.
Right. It's the not able to, or stepping away to deal with his aphasia diagnosis, where it's like it's a little bit of a career extension that maybe Bruce Willis feels like he wouldn't otherwise have.
Right.
But it also allows like that. I mean, that posthumous question comes up of like the family or a company making a decision of how you are going to be used. I mean, if you're Bruce Willis, but if any of us are also a human being, you can imagine what that would mean for someone to like have the rights to use your likeness in perpetuity, especially in a sense of playing roles in movies.
For sure.
It's like I'm sure that, like you said, the family's usually involved, and so maybe the slippery slope is not so slippery on a legal basis. But I do find it interesting to think of like, what if someone owns your likeness and then you fall from favor, and then they can just use your likeness in a way that's like things like roles you never would have taken, or
For
you know
sure.
what I mean, things you never would have consented to do on screen, they can make you do digitally. Again, I'm sure that's not going to be Bruce Willis's fate with his involvement. It sounds like he's actually involved right now in using some of this technology to give him a chance to appear in films, or at least the plan for him would be to be able to witness and enjoy some of this usage, maybe. But that idea that, yes, a deal is made and you're selling your likeness. I mean, it already happens with action figures and coffee mugs and merch and stuff. So I don't know, Ronald, how do you feel about this idea, this extra level of not just a company owning the rights to an image they may have of you, but like somebody saying, okay, we've got a virtual clone of Ronald and he works for us now?
I mean, as long as my family got a cut, it wouldn't feel so predatory. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like Bruce Willis's family and estate probably agreed to some terms. I don't know if he would have signed if they weren't, you know, kind of helping him out on some end. You know, It's like there could be like, you know, there could be another M. Night movie that has him in it. You know, there may be something really slick that they want to do that may involve him that, you know, with the right lighting and stuff like that, you just never know what they can accomplish. So
they could finally do that Color of Night prequel that everyone's
So I'm interested to see where it goes. You know, I guess we could talk about James Earl Jones at some point in this conversation, but just hearing about things like that, and the company that is based in Russia, who basically worked in silos to develop the voice of Darth Vader. You know, in James Earl Jones's absence, he kind of said that he couldn't perform at the level that he wanted to, and you know that this company took over, and it sounded nuts. I mean, if you listen to it, it sounded really good. The fact that, you know, if there are a lot of services where you could talk for 5 minutes, you know, and the more you talk, the better it gets, but it could pretty much take your inflections, figure out how you say things, and it's smart enough to know is incredible. But it really is just about how much you agree to, you know, versus what, you know, it's like what you were saying, like it could bastardize into something where, like, you know, you're getting kicked in the balls, you know, versus you being a hero in a movie. You could also be like fodder for a joke. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that the one thing I want to say, Ronald, about the James Earl Jones part that you just brought up is that that's yet another case of an artist saying, okay, I'm not able to do this anymore. So while I'm still around, I still exist, I'm going to almost like leave my stamp on this thing. So, I mean, obviously James Earl Jones got paid. I think, is he one of those people who famously didn't take a profit share in Star Wars? I feel like there's tons of those little stories of somebody who decided not to share in the profits of something, where you realize that they probably should have, but someone got paid. But no, James Earl Jones has always been associated with Darth Vader, and so much so that his name was listed in, at time. I mean, well, we think of him more than we think of the people that are physically in the suit. You know, oftentimes we don't have any idea who's in the suit. So, I mean, David Prowse is known, and then Hayden Christensen, I think, has been wearing it recently. But in general, it's like it's that voice that makes that character, and that sound design around that voice. So it's him taking charge of it a little bit, Ronald, like you said, and doing it before he dies, and then there's some debate about what they can do. There's obviously some choice made to say, like, and I'm sure James Earl Jones is proud of his role in movie history in this way and wants Darth Vader maybe to have a long life. I don't think Lucasfilm is going to stop using Darth Vader, so I'm glad that they get to keep using that voice. That's so much better than them having to resort to something different or whatever. But it is part of that question of like, yeah, are you at some point you're not here anymore, and then you're not the one making those decisions, and you have to trust that your family is, sort of thinking about things the same way you would, or shares your values about how your voice or your image could be used.
Yeah.
I want to say real quick, it's this is the top-notch research that this podcast provides. I'm just noticing
to the second
again. We were going to talk about this last week, and I'm reading an article that came out more recently. I don't know. I guess in the past few days, that apparently maybe he didn't sell his likeness to this company.
No,
but that basically, because I mean it got reported everywhere, but basically it's saying that let me see that Willis remains the exclusive owner of the rights to his likeness, that his agency CAA that it may have started there, because they did work with Bruce Willis in 2021 for these commercials. That this company, Deep Cakes, did these commercials with him. And he's on the website quoting his experience with them for that commercial. So I don't know how they went from that to him selling his likeness, unless it kind of backfired. But they basically, since that original article came out, it did come out saying that they basically, a spokesperson for Bruce Willis has denied that any ongoing partnership was in place with Deep Cake.
Now, are we sure that's a real spokesperson for Bruce Willis and not a deep cake?
That's what I'm getting at of his spokesperson, right?
A fake cake.
But I mean, regardless, I mean that news breaking, even if they're denying it, and I don't know, maybe that comes around and something is happening, but that kind of getting picked up and run with is just an interesting. Even if it ends up not being true. I mean, like the James Earl Jones thing is
the Darth Vader stuff about is true. That. It's true.
Right. He's talked about that. And this is going to be something that will eventually happen. It's just an interesting idea that it would happen with an actor of Bruce Willis's stature post an announcement from his family, like, about what's going on with his health. It's a situation where you could see the technology possibly pairing up with a need or an interest to kind of keep a likeness at least in the digital world alive and working. So I don't know. We'll have to see how that pans out. But yeah, it looks like since that original article came out, there's been some movement on whether or how accurate that is. I'd be curious if it changes even in the next few weeks, because it was like, a week later that they denied it. So like the news was out there for a week and then they said it wasn't the case. So it's still an interesting point. And like he was being promoted, or kind of the publicity was like he's like the first like big name to do this, and somebody will be that, and it's no doubt that it'll happen in the near future. So it's still an interesting conversation, and like everything that John mentioned specifically, like about what becomes of your likeness, in terms of what they're doing with it, with the characters that they're playing, with the quality of the performance, like to put your likeness on top of somebody else, the quality assurance and control is very questionable.
Mm-hmm.
You want to assume positive intent, obviously, but you never know.
Which might be why Bruce Willis seems to have not done that.
Yes.
So, possibly, yeah.
Because he probably did it, and then somebody was like, "What if you get kicked in a dick?" Like Ronald on movie Schmovie said. And they were like, he was like, you know what? That's fucking crazy. I don't want to have them beat me up or something like that, or put my head on the horse or something like that. It's fucking.
I love the idea that would be the breaking point.
That's where it stops. Like, I'm not willing to do that.
No centaurs. I do not want to be a centaur.
Not doing it.
But at any rate, I hope listeners and viewers appreciate that they just witnessed us learning something. And so it's like you can always learn, even after 350 odd episodes.
Hell yeah.
You can still learn. Well, let's move on to something that we're a little bit more informed about, I guess, which is something we've all watched. So Steve, maybe remind us what allowed what allowed this film to cross our paths. What made you choose the Neverending Story for our required viewing again?
I'm trying to remember. Well, I feel like it was mainly because we had done Brave Little Toaster, and like I had been thinking about like things from the '80s, like movies from the '80s, and you did Last Unicorn, and we were going through these things, and I was trying to think of an animated one. Nothing really popped in my mind immediately, but that week that we did Brave Little Toaster, I was talking to a friend of mine about the Neverending Story. I don't know if it was like tied into a Stranger Things conversation, possibly, but and just kind of made me realize that I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I knew, that I think it was on HBO Max and easily to watch, and yeah, so it felt like a good opportunity just to say, hey, I want to watch it again, and I can ask John and Ronald to watch it with me. So it seemed like a good choice. So
you can require us. It's not even an ask.
That's what it is. Yeah, it's like you
law.
can't say no. But I mean, have you guys seen the movie? Both of you prior to this, or I made an assumption, but have either of you seen it?
Yes.
Okay, an exorbitant amount of times for me.
Okay, right. I think you mentioned that last episode, but
yeah, I was wondering about that, how it remained as a touchstone. Because I mean, I would have been sort of the right age for it. I guess I would have been 11 when it came out. I remember checking it out from the library and watching it after school one evening. That's all I remember. And I remember waiting for it because it was the kind of movie that, as a kid, you really wanted to see something that had like creatures and fantasy realms and all that kind of stuff in it. But for whatever reason, it never really became one of my movies, and I don't think I've watched it since that day, since that afternoon that I watched it. So for me, this really was like cracking open something that I had memories of, but not strong memories of at all. And all I knew was that it seems like people that came along a little bit after my generation, like maybe not different generation necessarily, but people who came along in the next 10 years, it seems, we're more likely to grow up with an attachment to this movie. So
that would definitely be like probably closer to mine and Ronald's.
Yeah.
Because I definitely have like a affinity for this film, and I hadn't watched the German version or whatever that version that Ronald was mentioning on the last episode, and maybe I should, but
I mean, it's beautiful, but it also doesn't have any of the themes of it at the beginning or the end, and then they put this like weird accent on the character with the hat. He has like this like I don't know in the American version, does he have this like, remember when they go to there's like the snail character, the snail that goes really fast?
Yeah,
the guy has like
the guy that rides the snail. Yeah,
what kind of accent does he have in the American version?
That's Deep Roy, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
and I believe he is doing sort of a almost like he's doing like a British accent, but not a very good one.
Okay. In the German cut, he has a Southern accent. He's like, come on, guys, what are you doing right now?
Maybe maybe it's a bad Southern accent, but either way,
no. The accents are different. Like they did a different voiceover for the character. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what the German cut has. It's a lot of choices were made in the OG version versus the updated American one that eventually came like a year after or so that the movie was made or something like that. But what a weird choices. But I guess because we love it. John, what the fuck did you think of this movie, man? What did you think of such an interesting? Because I'm curious, man. Because we obviously hold this thing pretty close to the heart.
I would almost rather hear you guys talk about what it is that makes it strike such a chord with you, and then we can talk about just the experience for me of watching it. I mean, it's a weird movie, but it does have a different energy than a lot of other movies of its type in a way. I mean, but I wouldn't. I mean, I don't have like. It was just wild. I mean, I guess my short response would be that it's just full of things that they really go for it, and it's hard not to enjoy the kind of older tech, pre-CGI sort of way of doing a world like this. But that's also a real limitation on this movie. And I just looked; it was a $60 million budget, which was a lot, I guess, for those days. Yeah. And well, no, it's about United States maybe 25 to 27 million. So it was a 60 million Deutschmark budget, which is a weird way to record it on but I guess it was a German production. But it made about $100 million US in the box office. So I suppose it was enough of a success that, you know, it did spawn sequels and had like a cultural imprint. But it isn't, you know, it reminds me honestly of The Last Unicorn, which we watched a couple episodes ago, because it's like a fantasy story that has a weird dreamlike energy and a weird dreamlike pace to it. It doesn't feel the same as, like I said, others of its type. It's a little bit different, and that's where I'm really curious to hear what it is that you know, what a couple super fans love about it.
I mean, for me, I can kind of have like that reference point that you kind of were describing. Like I can remember like watching this, like getting that rental from like the library or something. Like you get that bag with the white snaps at the top on the handle. I don't know if you remember those when you used to rent the movies from the library.
For sure.
But I don't know. I just have like very vivid memories of like watching this movie with my mom, and you know, just like much like the characters watching it or reading his book in the movie, like, you know, on like rainy days and like I was home from school, or like, you know, we were off of school or things like that. You know, just like, you know, Bastion was like watching or reading this book. I feel like I would do the same with this movie. Like I would just put this movie on and watch it. And I mean, to be honest, like, you know, when it came out, I was only 3 years old or 4 years old. So I definitely obviously came to it on home video and, you know, a few years later. But I think what stood out to me and in the times that I've watched it since, and even the most recent viewing of it, is definitely like kind of how surreal and dark, you know, the fantasy is in this story. And I really always remembered liking how like the story in Fantasia starts out, you know, as the movie goes on. I always loved how like the story that Bastion's reading and the Fantasia that we see through his story is so bright and beautiful. And as the story goes, like you can see the nothing basically encompassing that world, you know, as Atreyu tries to find this cure. And I don't know, like as a kid, like I don't want to like be like excessive in saying this, but like I feel like it was one of the first memories I had of like a style, like a choice in a movie almost, you know, like, you know, it was a family film, it was a fantasy film. You know, there were moments in Bastion's world that were very scary. And like, as the story got scarier, like there was things in his world that were scaring him more. Like just this idea of like the parallelism and, you know, the fact that there are dark things in the story and there's dark things in your world and there are bright things that keep your world alive. You know, there was so much parallel storytelling happening as he's reading this book. And I honestly I think there's iconic characters in the movie. You know, like everyone I just mentioned, you know, I didn't even say Falcor, or, you know, Stonebiter, like things like that. I remember these characters. You know, I'm over 40, you know, I just turned 41 last week, and I'm just like, I'm talking about the Neverending Story still. And very passionately, because it's definitely one of my favorite movies of like that era of my life. And when I look back on it, the more I think about it, it's like I really valued how dark it got. And I kind of felt the same way about like a movie like Labyrinth, you know. And, you know, years later, Princess Bride would do the same kind of storytelling where you're kind of like reading a story and seeing the fantasy and, you know, the excitement in both worlds and things like that. But I don't know, the Neverending Story always just stood out to me, maybe because it was like one of the first ones I'd seen like that. And again, you know, as a kid that probably watched it when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, if not younger, like maybe that was too young, but I just remember how dark it felt, you know, amongst other things that I was probably watching at that time. But still so optimistic, you know, like, and so there's so much still about it that that was like fantastical to me. And that's not to be funny, like with Fantasia, but like, I just think that the way that world was presented and the journey that Atreyu was on was just so cool to me. And like, his name is Atreyu, and is like, you know, it's a dragon called Falcor, and there's like the whole Artax scene is like something that will scar you for life, depending when you've seen that movie. And that's just those like key things. Like I feel like a lot of people of our age know this movie. They know those scenes. They know those characters. They're kind of iconic, and I think it's just like stained in my mind. And it's just like the main reason I love it is just because it's like I find it to be very rewatchable. It's like one of those comfort watches for me. You know, like I just put this on, I could watch this movie so easily. But I don't know. Yeah. What about you, Rana? What kind of what's the big takeaways that you find, like the reasons why you hold it in high regards?
I was a undersized kid with a really squeaky voice. And I was scared. I was scared of the fucking world because I was like, I was the oldest of my family, but I was also that small kid with a really squeaky voice and no one really was scared of or took seriously. And I was nerdy and it didn't feel like that mattered. It's just like, that doesn't matter that you have these pockets of obsession. And I see this movie with this kid that doesn't look like me, but his experiences are pretty similar, right?
Right.
And I'm like, and this is the first movie that I saw besides maybe Rainbow Bright, because the Rainbow Bright movie really, where music was like pivotal. Like I'm like, this is adult music in a kid's movie. Like it felt like orchestral stuff used in a way that I had never really heard as a kid in a movie. And it was like, Aaron had never seen the Neverending Story, right? She was like, a kid, you watched this as a kid? I'm like, yeah. She's like, the horse died.
Yeah.
People are dying and they don't come back at the end of the movie. So for some of these characters, I'm like, yeah, this was it for me. Like it was there was permanence about it, right? So like as a kid, I'm like, oh, things could die. And
yeah, not to mention that Gamorg is like frightening.
Yes. It's like all those elements. And people don't help him all the time. Like when Atreyu goes to the big like turtle and he's just like, no, I can't help you. And he just sneezes on him. He's like, that's it. He doesn't help him. Like it's so weird to watch a movie that had so much realism in terms of like your journey being fucking hard and people not helping you sometimes, that really resonated with me as a kid and really still resonate with me now. So like Erin's watching this movie with me and she's like, this is so fucking dark. This is not a kid's movie I would have enjoyed as a kid. And I'm like, this was like my lifeblood. This is like my access to like, I got brave through this movie. I was like, I can face anything. If he could come out of this trash can. And I got bullied a little bit, man. Like I was, like I said, I was really small, like to the point where like people didn't think I was in the grade I was in. Right. They're like, you're in the first grade. You look like you're in pre-K. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. So this movie fucking hit me like a ton of bricks. Plus, there were titties in the movie. When they got to the gate, like it was like my adult movie that I couldn't really statues, man. Like, and my mom would like let me see this movie, and I'm just like,
hey, John, you take what you can get, man. You take what you can get.
I just wanted to be clear that if in case anyone's thinking, wait, did I miss something? It's just like there's a couple of like, what do you call those?
Topless sphinx sort of characters.
They're not sphinxes though. What do you call the ones with the wing? They almost are like harpies, but I don't think that's what they are. But at any rate.
But yeah, that stuff was like huge for me. It had all these elements. It was violent. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was violent.
It was violent. That, and it had breasts in it, and it was an adventure. And I'm not even gonna lie to you, man. I was to say that I was in love with the childlike empress is an understatement. She had the prettiest face I'd ever seen in my life. Right. And it was like really hard for me to process as a kid. I was just like, why do I feel like fireworks are in my fucking head? And it's just her face. It's like nothing really, like she has this really soft voice. And it was like overwhelming to me. It was overwhelming to me, this girl. So all that stuff together, and Atreyu was so fucking cool around her. I'm like, I would never be like that around this guy. I'd be like, oh yeah.
But like I said though, his name is Atreyu. You know what I mean? That's a good start.
Yeah.
Now, I was gonna just say that, like, and even listening to you talk about it, it's like that's the tie back to Last Unicorn, because there were like those hidden titties on that tree, and then our jump forward to Werewolf by Night, because Gamork is like a scary fucking werewolf, and I was like, this is what we do here. We just tie it all together. You know what I mean? Synergy. Yeah, okay, yeah. John, where are you at on this?
I mean, I think I'm responding to the weird nature of what you guys are talking about. The fact that this is a movie that has like a kid, like he starts off the movie, his mother has died, and Gerald McCraney is there. It's before he's aged into playing, William Randolph Hearst, or is that who he played? No, he didn't play Randolph Hearst. He played
Major Dad.
I can't remember which. It was Hearst on Deadwood though, but I don't remember which. It was like
what, for real?
Yeah,
I see him as Major Dad,
and he was one of the Simon brothers on Simon and Simon.
Yes.
But yes, Major Dad was perhaps his most name brand his production for years.
What? I gotta go back and watch.
Now, you remember Hearst, right? The villain of season 3 and the movie was the dad in this. But I love, so and the darkest thing is that whatever the dad's making in the blender with that raw egg, that he slowly drinks. I feel like that was just Gerald McCraney on the set being like, I'm going to show everybody I can slowly sip this disgusting beverage. That's how tough I am. But I don't know, like the darkness of the mom having died, and the darkness of the kid getting bullied, and he kind of goes and hides, and the darkness of the horse sinking into the quicksand or the quick mud, and some of the stuff. I would argue they do undo pretty much everything that bad that happened. All the characters that seem to have perished are back at the end. We see them. So I really don't think it quite has the.
That's heaven.
Well, but no, it's wish time, and it's an interesting thing that he just gets unlimited wishes at the end. And it's like, can I get more wishes? And it's like, yeah. And it's funny that they don't show him immediately wishing for his mom to be alive. Like that was the thing that really stuck with me. Was like his first words weren't "bring my mom back." It was like, and then I might bring some other people back too. But no. I mean, again, I'd heard about the death of Atrax the horse. As I know that it scarred people of a certain age, and somehow that missed me when I was 11. Like I may have not been paying as much attention as I could have been. I was probably having an afternoon much like the kid in the movie, and was kind of zoning in and out, and my life was getting crazy around watching this movie. I can remember being in the den and trying to watch a movie that was just for me while household stuff was happening around me, and just not being able to finish it well. But I guess I thought that character of the horse and their relationship was going to be built up a little bit more before he died. But it's like, okay, we meet Atreyu, we get sent on the mission. He hooks up with the horse. The next scene, they're in the mud. It's like I felt like I didn't get to spend enough time with the horse. But I do agree that if I take it back to being a kid and watching this, and I'm not thinking about like, this story's too episodic. I can totally imagine how traumatizing it would be for the horse. Like I know how I felt when I was watching stuff at that age. How like, if two characters were together, I instantly wanted them to be like buddies and go on an adventure together. So the fact that the horse is out of the picture so early, they do sort of earn it a little bit by having him really linger on it and he talks about it. And later when he sees an image, but I sort of feel like, there's this whole idea of this relationship that he had with the horse that I didn't get to see. But I think the movie sketches a lot of things like that in. So I think that it is sort of like, it's an interesting movie. It's yet another one of these movies that approaches it from outside of the norm. This isn't a Disney movie. This isn't a Lucasfilm production. This is a little bit different, and it's somebody trying to figure out something different, or a different way into that kind of mythic storytelling. And it does have a sort of gloominess to it and a weirdness to it. And you talk about Gamork, the sort of evil spirit, the fact that not only is he freaky looking and scary, even the animatronic aspect of him could look kind of phony, kind of adds to the creepiness of him. But just those eyes shining in the dark and that mouth, the way that Gamork is like wounded and seems equally afraid as he is dangerous. I think, that was interesting. I mean, I feel like there's some interesting philosophical things going on in this movie for sure. And I think I respond well to that. The part that I think I mentioned before about just the episodic nature of it, those are the things that prevented me from really like latching onto it as like, oh, this great saga or something that I could really think about. However, I think the presence of those dark elements and dwelling on death and dwelling on like even Gmork seems to have this kind of like, it's part of something that's dying out in this world. It's like the nothing is kind of wiping out Gmork as well. And the one other thing I would say is I love seeing practical effects. One thing that's funny about watching movies that use practical effects as much as possible, which I guess was the height of technology back then, is that back then people are spoiled now because they show you everything. Like if something happens, you see it happen. Back then, they did what they could, and if they didn't quite get it on camera, they used sound effects or a quick edit or a reaction shot. There's a few times in this movie where whatever happens, particularly with Gmork, like there's an early scene where he's chasing Atreyu through the swamp, where it's not really clear what happens at the end of that chase, you know? And then when Gmork attacks Atreyu out of the cave, it's a similar moment where like, okay, we know he jumps out, and we can see that they tussle, and we can see that Gmork gets got, but you don't really see any of that happen. Whereas now that would be a 5-minute or 10-minute battle sequence, you know? And I don't know that the storytelling is that much better just because we're so hooked on seeing everything. So I don't know. And also I will say that there's a scene early on where everything's kind of red. They're just in a red sort of world, and it's basically just red tinted. I mean, it's like an old school effect. Stuff like that really works on me. So I think, this was a movie that kept me interested throughout, even if it didn't quite work the nostalgic spell that it had for you guys. Because I can tell when you talk about these characters, they have sort of an iconic importance to you, and that's just not something you have unless something gets in at that age, or at least with this type of story, I think. But I can totally see what it is that people latched onto about it. And like I said, I think the handmade effects, the physical effects, I think that stuff just gets, it's like it never gets more phony looking. It's just as phony looking as it was the day that they put the movie out. But it gets a little more charming every day because it is a representative of a way they used to make movies that they just don't anymore. So there's a little bit more of that. If you suspend your disbelief and get into it, maybe it's a little bit more magical when something isn't so modern. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. I just think that there's something so special about the movie. And I mean, this is kind of what I identify with, just like Ronald was even hitting it a little bit. It's just, just the experience of Bastian, as however you can relate to him, whether it's how Ronald described, or if it's like, you're a bookworm and you love these kinds of stories, and you love reading fantasy, and there's like this want to be a part of the story and to see how he becomes a part of the story, to watch that play out in a movie was really cool, at the age that I came to this film, and it's still cool to me. And I think that, it's just kind of like, it felt like a pretty epic movie, at that age. And kind of the intertwine, like how the real world and Fantasia kind of become intertwined as the story moves along. Like that was something pretty cool. I was going to say, one of the things I was going to mention, I found the article in between the last few weeks when I rewatched it, to recommend anybody that is interested in Neverending Story. If you haven't watched it, obviously, I think we're all kind of saying check it out. But if you love Neverending Story, there's a really awesome oral history that EW did in 2019 for its 35th anniversary, with Wolfgang Peterson, the director, the three main stars of Atreyu, Bastian, and the Child Empress, and the singer of the song, the Neverending Story song, that you can find on EW.com if you just search for, Neverending Story. But it's an awesome, I love all those oral histories when they put those out, when they really kind of get the whole cast and crew involved. But there's a really fun one where they just kind of talk about like kind of coming to the book and adapting it to the movie, and just the production stuff with all the practical effects and things like that. It's a great read if you enjoy this film, or if it has a special place in your film history. I would recommend trying to find that article.
George Hurst.
George Hurst, yeah, that's
George Hurst on Deadwood.
That's the Deadwood character. That's right.
He's the predecessor to William Randolph Hearst, but
okay,
yes.
Gotcha.
Well, Neverending Story had sequels. How do they stack up? Do you guys have any thoughts about those movies?
They don't stack up at all.
They don't stack up. I kind of remember liking the second one, only mainly because Jonathan Brandis was in it, and I love Jonathan Brandis growing up. Rest in peace.
Sad.
Very sad. I remember I was a part of his fan club, and I got an autograph picture from him in the mail after I wrote him a letter. It was pretty awesome.
That is maybe the most Steve thing that I've ever heard in my entire life. You were in the Jonathan Brandis fan club.
Dude, what did we have back in the late 80s, early 90s? There's nothing. You got the magazine. You're like, oh, join the fan club, write a letter. And you write the letter and you get a picture signed like, hey, Steve, thanks for being a fan.
Allow 6 to 8 weeks for delivery.
Yeah, that's the key. And you got to postmark the letter so they can return it in the envelope. They don't pay for shipping. Right. But yeah, I remember liking the second one. Like it was just kind of like the first one was a hit. So the third one's horrible, like really bad. I can't remember the actor's name that's in that one.
Supposedly the second one is taken from like the second half of the book. The book, The Neverending Story, is the basis. Like they only used about the first half of it for the first movie. So if the second one is good in any way, it might be that it's linked to the same source material. Yeah. Because everything you guys are talking about that imprinted on you about the kind of darkness and heaviness of some of the themes, a lot of that sound. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but a lot of that sounds like those are literary ideas, like maybe in the text, the book, it might have some of that kind of mournful quality to it, or this. For sure. I think that's part of a lot of fantasy stories. It's in the Lord of the Rings story. It's in The Last Unicorn. This idea that magic is kind of in danger, or the magic that's in our world could be lost in some way. And the nothing in the Neverending Story, I mean, that's what it is. It's the nothing, but it's awesome. That's a great simple concept for this kind of existential feeling that really is like a black hole that's going around sucking everything up.
Yeah. Totally.
And then when you go through it, it's, you're in some other realm kind of, like in the end. So it is very, also we should mention it has that meta aspect of the little boy reading the story being kind of visible to Atreyu, and at some point they kind of are aware of each other, and I thought that was
so cool, man.
That was neat. And honestly, that was another concept that's played in a heavy way. It's not like they team up necessarily. It's not like the little boy who's hiding reading the book has to like clap his hands really loud to give Atreyu power or anything. It's just like they're bonded in some way that I wonder maybe in part 2, does that continue? Is that something that maybe was completed in a later part of the story?
Not really, no.
They're paired.
I mean, he's definitely aware. Like it's consistent in the sense that they're aware of one another, and the Bastion, who's played by Jonathan Brandis in the second one, does have like an impact on the story the same way that Bastion does in the first one. I was gonna say the other thing I remembered about the third one is that Jack Black is in it. It's like one of his earlier roles. He plays Slip.
Now I gotta rewatch it.
Rewatch. But yeah, I mean, it's a classic to me, no question. And again, like I said at the top, it's on HBO Max. If you want to check it out, it's there if you have a subscription. And I think that maybe in 2019, if you want the physical media, there's a couple different versions of like remastered versions that came out for the 35th anniversary. Yeah. That's out there too. But
don't get the German one. If you want to hear the theme song,
that's Ronald's take. That's
gorgeous.
It's
a gorgeous Blu-ray. It's a gorgeous 4K Blu-ray. But if you want the theme, get the American one that came out. Yeah.
The theme, like the theme music, or you mean like the song, the pop
song? Theme, the intro. There's an intro in clouds that is not in the beginning.
Okay.
The German one is dark, and it just has wind blowing. It's just a wind blowing sound with credits. It is so somber, and then it just goes into the story. Yeah, for sure. So what's next? What do we?
Well,
the required viewing, right? Well, we're in October, so it's time to watch maybe some creepies.
Holy shit!
And I think a word that came up a lot in our discussion of Neverending Story was magic. So I'm thinking, why not watch the movie Magic from 1979? I'm checking to make sure. 1978. Magic is, according to Wikipedia, an American psychological horror film starring Anthony Hopkins, Anne Margaret, and Burgess Meredith. It's directed by Richard Attenborough, who played John Hammond in Jurassic Park. So we'll watch this movie to find out what does he say? What does someone say to him? You just because you could, Doesn't mean you
Doesn't mean you
should, or something like
yeah.
that. So we'll find out if maybe they should have made this movie or not. But this is the
Okay.
movie that scarred me when I was young. It was another library checkout movie. And this is the movie with the, Anthony Hopkins plays a ventriloquist who has a peculiar relationship with his ventriloquist dummy. And you get to have the full creepiness of the ventriloquist dummy, played out on film. So, and this has one moment that is one of my all-time scares in my head that I'm curious to see if it still works on me. Okay. But it's worth noting that this movie, which is kind of it's a creepy horror movie, that is based on a book by William Goldman and with a screenplay by the great William Goldman. I actually have the book on hand, and I'll be reading it, so I can be super annoying when we talk about it. I can talk about how accurate it is to the book, but also it's worth noting that the next movie that Richard Attenborough directed. You want to take a guess as to what the next thing he directed was? Gandhi.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean
that's a jump.
Well, this was just the kind of level that he was working at. He was like, I guess this was like this was the kind of like bring in a serious director to take this project type of movie. I think they had it had a development process, but yeah, it's one that I remember really liking, and it was one of the early kind of horror films, like a big studio horror film that one of the early ones I remember watching when I was a kid. So
cool.
We'll see if it still holds up. Magic.
Sounds good. So, I've never seen it.
Me either. I'm excited. Speaking of horror, can we talk about the special Marvel Studios presentation to kind of get us ready for the Halloween mood? Werewolf by Night.
Mwah.
Man, what?
This is what Marvel should be doing. Especially as they bring in more and more kind of oddball third-tier characters. This is the way they should be doing it, because you can get a great team, like in terms of the on-screen talent, and you can get a great, people with an idea behind it, and you can make something that totally fits in with the stories that they've told if they want to make it fit in, but also exists completely on its own. And, this could have been stretched out to a movie and would have been pretty good. I'm glad it wasn't a show. I think this makes me look back at a couple of the Marvel shows they've put on Disney Plus and wish that maybe we had gotten like a
one-off.
What if we'd gotten or if we'd gotten a 2-episode Moon Knight event? Imagine how great that would have been. Imagine how high we were on that character after just a taste.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think this is not just a perfect taste of this werewolf character. It's a pretty simple character. He's a werewolf. Yeah. But it's a complete story, and I said it, and you agreed, Ronald, as a comics reader. This is equivalent to that single issue you would find when you were a kid, back before you collected runs and you thought about the whole continuity. You would a comic book would cross your path when you were a kid. You'd be at an uncle's house or in a waiting room, and there'd just be a comic book sitting there, and you'd read it, and sometimes you'd get a good one. And this, to me, was like reading a good single issue of a comic, and all that entails. It was really super enjoyable, and I kept waiting for it to screw up or have a moment that kind of messed up the vibe for me, but it didn't. It felt really good all the way to the end, and I think even to the point of introducing characters that now I would like to see a little more with Werewolf by Night and his friend Ted.
Yeah.
I mean, it was super quirky, man. Like everything from the intro where the gentleman comes out of the casket, and like that won me over. Like, you can't get any more quirky than that. Like, how did that get right?
It's definitely like going for that, like like the Universal monsters, the Hammer horror stuff. Like,
so good.
I think that's really kind of what got me so heavily with it, was just that, like, it felt, for all these things you say, like Marvel feels the same or looks the same or does the same, whatever adjective you want to use, that's the same part of the process. I don't think you can say that about this. I mean, like, it's these are characters from comics, sure. But, there's nothing about this it looks or feels or moves, pacing, anything like anything that Marvel does. And that's a fact, I think. Like, I feel like most people that I've seen watch this have kind of all said the same thing. And, I kind of went into this trying not to really know a lot about it. I saw the trailer. I knew about Giacchino being involved and things like that. But, like, after you guys checked it out and were very positive about it, I got even more excited to see it, because, I mean, it just looked awesome. And I think that's really what works in its favor the most, is just that it doesn't really feel, look, move like anything Marvel's done. And I honestly feel like since Endgame, or, the Infinity War films, like, maybe with the exception of No Way Home, like this is my favorite Marvel thing they've put out since then. Like, and maybe it's because of what John said, is just that it feels like, it makes me feel like some of the shows could have been better as like a special presentation, or maybe a 2-episode, or maybe just something a little longer, or maybe this is like a sweet spot between needing to have a full series and or not be a full movie. Because just over 50 minutes, it's like it accomplishes so much with the title character and with other characters that you meet in the movie. But I loved it. Like, I can't recommend it enough, and especially because of the time that it's coming out. I think it felt like a great, like, just kind of palate cleanser for me, because I feel like kind of not great about some of the Marvel stuff recently, which bums me out. But then this came along and I was like, fuck, that just blew away all my expectations of what I thought it was. Yeah. And I loved it. It was great.
Well, we have the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special coming up in a couple months, and James Gunn has been very, very bullish on that, saying that it's he's happy about, that it's one of the best scripts. He's always very bullish on whatever he's doing, but like, he said it's a real part of the Guardians story, and it's going to be good. So I could see how that format, about 50 minutes, is a good format for a complete story, and it doesn't have to throw in all the extra stuff that might make a movie in some ways give you all these memorable moments, but it forces you to streamline the story and maybe tell a smaller story. But not to say that that's what James Gunn is doing with his. I'm just saying these little one-offs, there's reason to think that might be a fun playground for some of these people who aren't going to stick around and direct every episode of a show, or maybe a character that isn't going to warrant a movie. I mean, it's like the pros and cons of She-Hulk have me wondering if that could have been a really good, like, hour-long special. If not, this like, could they have pushed the effects a little bit more and maybe had a little bit more of the quality control that I think has been bumping some people from that show, but still have the tone and the comedy and whatever makes it special. No, I agree with you, Steve, that like the retro aspect, these Marvel things constantly are saying like, this one's actually kind of a spy thriller, or this one's a heist film, and they're always a little bit that, but this really does go for a different look and a different feel, and that classic horror feel. I mean, Michael Giacchino is someone who we know as a composer, who's been part of some really great scores. I love that he did something so stylistically bold, and that he was allowed to do it within this Marvel framework. Which, again, this exists barely within that framework. If people are listening and they think this sounds cool, but I don't really like that Marvel stuff, this doesn't even really feel like the Marvel stuff. But what's cool about it is how well it does click with it, in the sense that we do get a sort of a taste of a hero, a person who's clearly trying to do things, trying to save people and help people and do as much right as they can in a dangerous situation. Like, you still get that little intro to somebody who you root for. And it still has the fun of that you might want from Marvel, but I didn't feel like this had that much of the sort of winking at the audience stuff that I think audiences might be getting a little weary of in the Marvel thing. This had honest jokes and honest humor, but it didn't seem like it was poking fun at its own premise too much. And maybe Marvel, by and large, is going to move past that a little bit and just, kind of throw themselves in with some sincerity and not feel like they have to hang a lampshade on everything kind of strange. So, well, I'm glad we all liked it, because when I watched it, I was like, oh man, is this going to be one of those things that I find out other people hate? But I've been very quickly, I noticed people were on social media, friends and people I follow were saying, hey, check this out. This is actually really good. And it's similar to what's happening over on the Star Wars side for me with Andor, which is like some of the best written Star Wars that's ever been, and definitely my favorite Star Wars thing since Solo, I think. Like, when I think back to the movies, like when I was still really excited to go see a Star Wars movie in the theater, I think Solo was the last one that really had me completely in its grasp. And, I think Andor is is like a real story and a real show, and in it, not in the same way that Werewolf by Night functions genre-wise, but I do think it's that thing, Steve, of like, what's going to make you excited about this franchise again? It's going to be somebody doing something that feels real, that feels like it really needs to exist on its own terms, and that feels like it's its own thing. And I think Werewolf by Night is that, and I think that I think on the other hand, Andor does that. It's like I'm into that for different reasons than just that it's Star Wars, you know. And that just means, I don't know I can't remember the name of the actress from Y Tu Mamá También, but she needs to get her giant franchise right now, because it'll probably be really good.
Yeah. Cool.
What character, Ronald, would you pick now to do, if you could pick a character to get a special like this? Do you have any Marvel characters that are left that haven't been brought to the screen?
That's a good question. Sabretooth.
Now that we're in the realm of being able to do the...
Yeah, man.
Like, Sabretooth could be a cool one-off.
We're always talking about Wolverine. I love how much Sabretooth had a cool story outside of Wolverine. And I think that, like, of course, I love that it was always on site when it came to those two. It was like, if I see you outside, I'm going to try to tear you apart, which I loved. And if they talk about that, that's cool too. But another person, a part of the whole, like, nastiness of Weapon X and adamantium and all that stuff that he's never gotten the on-screen love that he deserves, even as a foe of Wolverine. So yeah, Sabretooth, an hour-long Sabretooth story. Yeah, I loved it.
I would ask Steve, but I don't think you have any comics memories to...
I don't. I mean, nothing that's like more obscure. But one thing I did think about when I was watching it, because I had just watched the episode of She-Hulk where Daredevil comes in, and thinking about how many episodes that Daredevil season is going to be, I was thinking
18.
I was thinking like maybe one of these special presentations would be a better way to introduce some or reintroduce some of the other characters from
I like that
the Netflix Marvel shows, instead of having to give them all shows.
Yeah,
because I mean, I would love to see Barenthal come back, or Jessica Jones, or Luke Cage. Like having any of them be back in. So
you didn't leave anybody out, Steve. When
no,
all those characters
I didn't at all.
Named, you didn't leave anybody out.
No one. They're all there. Yeah. I would never.
Poor Iron Fist.
Poor guy.
Right.
What they should have done with that, they should have just done a Luke Cage and Iron Fist show. And that way Iron Fist could be the stick in the mud, rich asshole character bouncing off of Luke Cage, as they were frequently partnered in the comics. That would have been the way maybe to get people into Iron Fist. I think on its own, Iron Fist just didn't feel like the show for now, you know, and it didn't feel like the character for now. But no, I agree with you, Steve. That would be a fun approach to say, like, they could do a Luke Cage Easter special, since they've already got Christmas and Halloween on lockdown.
So was that episode of I love this term, backdoor pilot. Was that a backdoor pilot we saw? Was that Daredevil episode a backdoor pilot? Because I thought it was.
It's already happening, so it can't be. But I do think it felt like that. It totally felt like that. It felt like a network crossover of a character hopping on from another character's show. But what I liked about it was that we got a slightly updated version of Daredevil. It was a little bit like he's a little bit more in that MCU flavor. To me, it was like, oh, they're telling us we can add this together with his cameo from No Way Home. And we can picture what the MCU iteration of this character is going to be like.
Right.
You know? And I liked it. I thought Charlie Cox was great on She-Hulk.
He was great, man.
I thought the way they've modified the costume, the cowl looked a little bit cooler. It didn't look quite... Before, there was something kind of short. Like, there's something kind of short about Charlie Cox's nose and brow, that when they made a cowl that fit that, it looked a little bit goofy. I feel like they've adjusted that, made it a little bit cooler looking. You know, they can do the red or the red and yellow, but I just thought it was a great use of him, especially the fact that, spoilers, folks, if you don't want to know what happens on She-Hulk, jump ahead a couple minutes. But I think it's hilarious that they hooked up, and then he has like a walk of shame, and it's not presented as like this is like the next big chapter for either one of them. But I just like that within the Marvel universe. I think that's the first casual hookup between two established heroes that we've had, and it wasn't even treated like a big deal. And
right.
For all the strengths and weaknesses for me of She-Hulk, I think that's one of the major strengths of the show, is that it can deviate from the Marvel norm and show you a little bit more, in that sense, a more grounded bit of human life. They've been a little bit more honest about, dating and that kind of stuff on that show, and hookup culture and all that kind of stuff. So I felt like that was just a funny use of Daredevil that made me hopeful that, maybe he will have a little bit of spark of humor in the new Marvel show, but it won't take away that essence of Daredevil.
Right.
What are they going to do with 18 episodes? I mean, there's not like a Daredevil story from the comics that has to be adapted over that many hours. Right. I wonder if they're going to give us like a case of the week type of thing, and make it feel like an old school lawyer show, but with a superhero, kind of what they're doing with She-Hulk, but in a less comedic.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I know for sure they're probably going to take a break. I think that's one of the things. I don't know if they're going to give us 18 in a row. I think they're going to do like a mid-season break where they skip a couple weeks and then hit us with the rest of it. I mean, if the story's good enough, it'll build tension anyway. I mean, that's pretty cool. But 18's a lot. That's a lot. Well, that's like an old school like Fox season. That's like a
right. That's like just a few episodes shy. Well, that's kind of why I'm asking, is because so often these shows, we feel like they're either stretched out or rushed somehow, or both stretched out and rushed at 6 episodes or 7 episodes. So 18 episodes, it's like makes you go, ugh. I don't know that they need that many hours to tell a story like this, but if they are going to give us lots of cases of the week or sort of an episodic style story, there's definitely enough in Daredevil's setup, just that he's a lawyer and a superhero. You can get enough stories out of that to do kind of what you're saying, Ronald, like a traditional old school television season.
Yeah.
But we'll see. That's not coming for a couple of years. There's a lot of things happening with Marvel. They even recently kind of bumped some things back.
Yeah.
Because the director left Blade. Is that what happened?
Yeah, well, there were reportedly a lot of issues with the script, and then the first big domino to fall was the director leaving the project, and then it went back out for a director search, and they were going to rewrite the script. And from the sounds of it, it just seems like they weren't, confident in where the script was or what options were available for a replacement, which is crazy because the movie, it's like bumped back a year, right?
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, which is crazy because like if they're starting from zilch, the fact that it's still coming out in 2 years is nuts to me. Like that means that they have an assembly line, at least for the special effects. They know they have something. That just is a little weird that it's just like from scratch. It's still coming out in 2024.
Well, here's the thing. There, it tells me on a certain level, like that they're invested in this. Like there's something.
For sure.
It almost reminds me of when the Obi-Wan series got put on hold and then brought back, and it became clear they were trying to fix what they thought was weak about it to make it like a major thing. Whether they succeeded or not, you can be the judge. But I could see them saying, as they go forward, maybe the response to something like Werewolf by Night, maybe there's different things going on that they're looking at that slate and saying, we kind of need Blade to be really something special. We think we could do something cool with this, and what we have here doesn't feel that great. I mean, maybe they're doing a little bit of behind the scenes cleaning up of some of those quality control problems, or that doesn't mean the script they're going to arrive at is going to be great, but a whole year of extra time does give them plenty of time to kind of rejuvenate something. But it is always funny to me that a project stays on the calendar at all when it so clearly is being rebuilt from the ground up, because it's almost like, I mean, that's a little bit what we talk about sometimes as a negative, is these movies that are created towards a release date. That can result in some real problems. I think Marvel has enough of a process and enough of lead time on these things that usually they can be there with the movie they want to release in time. But it always seems a little dangerous to me when they announce 5 or 6 projects, and it always seems like something's destined to move. And if it's Blade that really moves, then I just hope it is cool, because I do think now that we've seen this little taste of what the kind of Marvel horror flavor might be like, it would be cool if Blade can go further in that direction, maybe be kind of scary.
Yeah. We'll see.
Especially with Mahershala. We love him.
I mean, that's why you don't fuck it up. Is you got Mahershala
That's kind of what I'm
Ali
getting at. Yeah.
as Blade. Like, you know, you don't want to mess that up because that could be a longevity character right there. Like you could have him for a bit. Yeah. All right. Cool. Again, Werewolf by Night to circle back on Disney Plus. But that's there now if you want to check it out. What else have you guys watched? Anything you want to mention before we wrap the episode up?
Well, Ronald, I know you saw Hellraiser, the new one. I saw it as well. I kind of wondered what your general thoughts on that were. This is a reboot / remake.
Yeah. What a fun movie. I mean, for what it was. I mean, I'm not a huge Hellraiser fan. I mean, I've seen bits and pieces. I know that I've seen one in its entirety. I know that I have, but it's been a while. But I loved the feel of it. You know, it really felt like Stakes, you know, and a kind of this parallel with addiction, and it kind of felt like the best use of addiction since the Evil Dead remake a couple years ago. But it was bloody, it was violent, it was visceral. I would suggest it. Like if you're okay with body horror, this was a solid horror film. Like it just felt like, you know, it didn't feel like the budget was crazy, but if Prey and then this are kind of the standard of the movies that we're going to get, I'm good with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really impressed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I found it like it's very bleak in a way and kind of grim.
So bleak.
And so I think I did find it, like I thought it was good. I thought it was well done. And I think that like the way that it handles some of the scares, by the time it gets to the end, I'm not sure that all the Cenobites work as like fear machines, but some of them really do. Yeah. Like some of them really do creep you out, and the more you look at them, the worse it is, you know? Not all of them have that effect, but I think just the notion of them as being these kind of angels of pain that show up from this, they sort of are, they're not really part of a religious structure. They're part of like a cosmic horror structure that's outside of our experience. And we might call them demons or angels, but they're something else. I think that concept is creepy. I think that the characters, the performances, like you said, it did remind me of Evil Dead, the remake with the addiction plot line. And I think what really made me start to favorably view this movie was that I watched another movie called Jeepers Creepers Reborn, which is not well made in the ways that Hellraiser is, and not well written, not well acted, in my opinion. And I mean, like, it really made me realize how much Hellraiser, despite being like, oh, it's eventually everyone's kind of locked into a haunted house and they're kind of being picked off by monsters. That's a formula that once you're locked in, you kind of know what you're in for. Hellraiser continued to creep me out and show me little variations on that. Jeepers Creepers Reborn is just a mess. I mean, it's just a schlocky mess, and I haven't seen a lot of people defending this movie, so there's not much sense in kind of kicking it while it's down. But I will say this, that it had like an egregious amount of unnecessary green screen in it. Like backgrounds, people are just standing outside a house at night, and for whatever reason, they're not really standing outside a house at night. They're against a green screen. People are in a car, man, to the point where like the green screen, people's, you know, like chunks of people's hair are erased in a weird looking way because they're up against a bright background and you can see it. Just really bad in that sense. I kept thinking, like, am I watching something? Did I accidentally rent the work print of this thing? I don't have a lot of attachment to the Jeepers Creepers mythos or anything. I think that the director, for one thing, has a pretty nasty reputation as a pretty terrible person. But beyond that, I did not follow through on watching any sequels to it. But this one I just thought I would check out because I knew we were recording and it's the time of year for horror. And boy, is it like, I mean, it really made me realize how much effort and quality control went into making Hellraiser. Because this is like that. This is what it looks like when you go and you make a horror sequel without a lot of money and out a lot of care and out a lot of good ideas. And I will say it does have this exchange in it that I wrote down just because I thought it was great. There's a scene where the characters are beginning to suspect something's up, and someone says, "We're in an escape room," and then another character says, "It's not an escape room; it's a trap." And then another character says, "Well, who's the trapper?"
Oh yeah,
right there.
Yeah, trapper.
Shit.
That's a real word that people use, right? I mean, I know it is, but it's like, who's the trapper? No, it is. That's what you'll be asking when you're watching this movie: is who's the trapper?
Who's the trapper?
How did I get trapped in into watching Jeepers Creepers Reborn? Does anyone here even care? I mean, I feel like the first Jeepers Creepers, when I saw it, I thought it had some kind of good moments in it, and it was a little bit unexpected. But I was a little surprised that it spawned sequels, because it didn't seem that like that kind of movie to me. Does anyone here have any attachment to those movies?
Not the sequels. I love the first one.
Yeah.
I remember when I worked for the marketing company here in Baltimore, when one of the sequels came out, the one where they're on the high school teams on the bus. That one, like,
breaks through
that movie, the publicity tour for that was pretty cool. They like actually had the bus, and the cast was doing their press tour on the bus. So like they were driving around to the major cities, and like you could like do your remotes or the live shots from the bus with the cast. It was pretty cool. The movie wasn't good, but it was a cool shot. But the first one, I loved the first one, Justin Long. I think that's a great one. But
yeah, that ending is insane in the first one.
Amazing ending, incredible ending. But the sequels don't have any place for me. I haven't watched probably past the first, like the second or third one.
So I don't know how this one fits in with any kind of like established storyline or mythology. So I couldn't tell you how they update the story of the Creeper, but it felt like a real messy attempt to kind of repeat the moves of the first one and then try to do something different. And I don't think either part of the movie worked. But
works. Gotcha. What else? I wanted to mention, I watched again, horror, or sort of, the Mr. Harrigan's Phone on Netflix, Stephen King's story. Was not good. Can't recommend that one.
I haven't heard anything good about that either.
No, I did not like it. Jaden Martell's in it. He's the kid who played Bill Denbrow from the It movies, and Donald Sutherland. But just a weird, like, pacing, poor, bad script. I haven't read the source material, so I don't know if that's a great Stephen King story or not. But interesting idea. But I can't recommend the movie. One I can recommend, though, which I think is on Paramount Plus, is called Significant Other.
Oh yeah, how's that?
I like that a lot.
I almost watched that, so I'm glad to.
I will definitely say that one might be worth checking out. It's not amazing, but I will say it is not the movie that I thought I was watching when I went to watch it. Like the trailer I saw, and it's kind of like, oh, what, something's off or something's happening. But within 10 minutes, you kind of see what's going on, at least in the grand scheme of the story, and then it kind of there's some little plot twists. I don't think it ends as strong as the kind of middle second act of the movie is, because it really kind of picks up. But the very end is kind of what I liked about it. It kind of felt like maybe like an episode of The Twilight Zone or something. But Jake Lacey's in it, who I love, and what's her name? Micah
So
Monroe.
she was like, she wasn't making movies for a while, and then she put out 2 bangers, apparently.
Yeah, 2.
Watcher came out.
Yeah, loved Watcher.
I like that one a lot.
Good, man.
And I think you guys would dig this one. I think it's kind of got an interesting turn in it that'll be. There is a piece of it that kind of gets a little kind of silly, which is kind of the only thing I can say. It kind of works because of what it works because of where the story ends. But while it's happening, I was kind of like, it was kind of like a weird scene. But it seems like not like a crazy budget, but for what it is, I thought it's like right in that lane of like weird mystery. There's maybe a sci-fi happening. Something weird is going on in those woods. And if you've seen the trailer, it's just a couple that goes on a hike and something happens. And that's one thing that I like about it too, is that like the whole movie is kind of really just 2 characters for the most part. There's a couple other side characters that come in for a couple scenes, but I wanted to recommend that. And I also wanted to say I watched the first few episodes of The Midnight Club on Netflix, and I'm only like 2 or 3. I'm only 2 or 3 in, but I'm digging it. I mean, like, I love this. I love the Christopher Pike books growing up. So I'm kind of curious to see where they kind of go as the season goes along. But so far, it's Mike Flanagan, so I'm a fan so far.
I saw him asking on Twitter about like where people were finding the show, and it is true that it was like that it's October and it's a new Mike Flanagan Netflix horror oriented project. The fact that it's not like screaming to you from the front page is
so weird. You had to, and like even based on like your viewing, like I've watched all of this stuff, and like I've thumbs up all of it.
Algorithmically, it should be right there for you. Yeah,
something had to be broken or something. Because I saw you liked or commented on my tweet, like because he was asking, and I was like, you couldn't find that shit. You had to search for it. Yeah. It wasn't even like I even had like the reminder set, and it didn't even like show up at the front of my list. It was weird. So that's what I got. What do you got, Ronald? Let's wrap this up.
Just two things. I know what you did last summer, 25th anniversary, 4K. So I gotta be.
What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Right here.
Yes.
That's my girl. That's my number one of all time.
What are you waiting for? That's me waiting for Ronald to mention the 4K transfer of some movie that I never would have imagined. That like but I mean I'm not knocking it. I know that it's like these movies can suddenly be beautiful and you see them the way they were meant to be seen.
Yes.
I always love you lately with these sort of horror picks.
Man, like it's a cool time because they're trying to put it in the best quality that it could be in, right? So that's not necessarily why I watched it. What I kept hearing about it was the 4K track of it. I'm like, all right, let me check it out, man. It really changes the feel of this movie. I did not love I Know What You Did Last Summer growing up. I watched it I watched it the other day. I was like, okay, this mix makes it crazy. Like it just, it's just spatial stuff that really hits hard. Like the whole scene where they hit the person just has this sound to it that's just so when people are not in the scene and you hear them talking over here, like that spatial sort of stuff that I'm just a huge fan of. It's just a banger of a release. And Sony puts out these releases, regardless of what you watch it on, digital video, whether you watch it on iTunes or something like that. There's a crispness that Sony's pulling off with all these releases. I'm a big fan of. And the last thing I wanted to talk about that may as well be a fucking horror film. Gorgeous in its scope and perspective and sound and look is Severance. Apple TV. Just a show that's haunted me since I finished it. It's just
I'm glad you finally watched it. I almost can't believe.
Yeah, man. I think what was happening is like, one thing we don't talk about Apple TV stuff, besides it being great, is a lot of it is really dense, So like, if you're getting in the sea, you're dealing with a whole like denseness to that story. It's just like, am I ready to jump into this world? My wife just kept talking about it. She watched the end and was like, her face was kind of stuck. Like I came into the room and she's just like, and then I remember you guys talking about it. I'm like, what kind of ending can it be that she would be like that? Like, is it like The Sopranos? And I watched it, and it couldn't have been a more epic. Like, I've never been so like, what? How? But he just said, what? How? But what does this mean for the story? Credits. It was so well done, man. Like, Ben Stiller giving.
Will you do commentary for the whole next season of Severance? I want to hear just that, just your reactions.
What? How?
But you were about to say Ben Stiller, like he's got talk about. We've been, quality control comes up a lot on this show.
Yeah,
but like he's a guy who typically has a lot. Like there's a high level of some level of a concept, some level of you don't necessarily think about it with the stuff that he does. This was the first time I really thought about that element of what he brings to project when he's directing, and I think Severance is like stylistically so refined.
Yeah. Walter Mitty.
It
Walter
feels like
Mitty
nothing
was
else.
the first time that I was like, oh my god, like Ben Stiller might be a great director, like whatever the execution was. And funny enough, what's the name's in it? I'm stuck on his name. The star of Severance.
Adam Scott.
Adam Scott.
Adam Scott's in Walter Mitty. It's just like seeing him in that movie. And this is before I was like a huge Adam Scott fan, and Walter Mitty and how I felt about him in that movie. I did not forget about how asshole-ish he was. And then seeing Severance where he's doing so much, and so each character is doing so much, and then unexpected heroes, unexpected villains, unexpected like these dips and ebbs and flows of power that just kind of get snatched from people, and people take it back, and it's a masterpiece. I don't know if I've felt so. I haven't felt like this in a while about a show, and just seeing the teaser that a second season is in existence and we have access to it when it comes, it just warms my heart. and then I saw the damn trailer for Spirited on Apple TV with Ryan Reynolds and
Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell, man, like Apple TV is working on all cylinders, man. They just cooking with grease.
I would say if you really like, I mean, well, just on the topic of Ben Stiller directing,
sure.
We didn't mention, I don't know if you saw Escape at Dannemora, but I would recommend you find that and watch that too. That was a series.
No, I haven't seen that.
That was a series he did before Severance, and
what's it called?
Escape at Dannemora. It's
Benicio del Toro and Patricia Arquette.
Paul Dano, Bonnie Hunt.
What?
David Morse. Yeah, it's like, it's great. I think she might have won some award too for it. Patricia Arquette may have won like an Emmy or something for it. But or maybe not. I don't know. It's great though. It's a really good series, and I want to say that was when it aired. I think it was on Showtime.
I remember. I didn't know that he did this.
Yeah, I think, and I think the difference there is, I want to say, I'm trying to remember. He may have directed the whole series.
Okay, gotcha.
Where with Severance, I don't think he directed every episode.
Right.
But he definitely executed. Like, he's behind his production company is who produced it. But yeah, I don't know. Just also to put it on your radar, if you like his direction and much more similar to the kind of what he's showing off in Severance, I would definitely recommend that one too, because it's great.
You think it's more cinematic than
yeah,
2?
just slightly, Cool. All right, man. I was just thinking if I had anything else, but that'll be it. Movieschmovie.com is the website. You can find all the past episodes there. Choose the podcast platform of your choice if you want to subscribe. And jump from there in any of the social medias if you want to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, where you can subscribe to the video portion of this podcast. We'd appreciate it. And if you do subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment, hit a share button.
What's the problem?
Yeah, what's the problem here, guys?
Yeah.
We'll be back next week. 353 coming at you with a little magic. As
I'm excited about that, man.
So let's make that happen.
And just in case there are multiple projects named that, just a reminder: this is the Magic from 1978.
1978. Okay, cool.
Hopefully we'll be able to talk
John
about
Hammond himself.
The Halloween ends too. So hopefully we'll have all seen that by next week.
Oh
so
man,
we'll talk that next week.
So excited about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll see how it turns out. I'm sure it does end, but we'll see. How we feel about it.
Will evil die that day?
We'll see. Again, I don't know. We gotta wait and see, Ron. I mean, like, it's happening this Friday. So what if
the twist is that it doesn't end?
John, don't spoil things, man. Why would you even put that into the world?
Sorry.
All right, Ronald, close your mouth, and we're gonna say, as always, You made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
But who's the trapper?